Go back together in time, 40 years ago, when most American families still gathered around the one TV set in their homes to watch together.
Happy Days wasn't just another sitcom. It was a weekly tradition, a warm, familiar escape that made millions smile. For 10 years, it filled living rooms across America with laughter, love, and leather jackets. But even the brightest stars can cast shadows. Behind the laughter and the jukebox glow, there was one moment, one scene, that changed everything. It's remembered today as the point where Happy Days, the show that defined an era, crossed a line that divided fans, critics, and even its own cast. That moment didn't just mark a turning point for the show, it coined a phrase that would echo across television history. What was it that turned the tide for this beloved series? How did one daring stunt, meant to entertain, become the symbol of decline in American pop culture? Pause. Music swells. Join us as we step back into a time when milkshakes ruled the diners, when jukeboxes played your favorite song, and when one man in a leather jacket defined cool itself. This is the story of Happy Days, and the moment it jumped the shark. Music fades into upbeat 1950s rhythm. Imagine stepping into a world of chrome diners, checkered floors, and high school dances. That was the charm of Happy Days. Premiering on ABC in 1974, Happy Days transported audiences back to the 1950s, a time of drive-ins, Letterman jackets, and simpler dreams. Created by television legend Gary Marshall, the show followed the lives of the Cunningham family in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as they navigated everyday joys and teenage troubles. At its core, the show offered more than laughs, and it was comfort. Families gathered together week after week to watch a reflection of an idealized past. The show didn't just remind people of what life once was. It reminded them of what life felt like. Soft piano chord. In a decade overshadowed by political scandals and cultural upheaval, Happy Days felt like a hug from a bygone era. Parents saw their youth mirrored on screen, and kids saw a world where friendship, respect, and heart-to-heart talks could solve almost anything. Over its 11 seasons and 255 episodes, Happy Days captured that perfect blend of humor, warmth, and nostalgia. Whether it was dinner around the Cunningham table, teenage crushes at Arnold's Drive-In, or lessons learned in the garage, each episode left viewers smiling. It wasn't just a show, it was a time capsule, one that let audiences escape into the glow of a more innocent age. Music swells, light laughter track fades in, but at the heart of that charm stood one face, one man who would redefine what cool meant on television. The soul of Happy Days was Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard. Richie was the perfect American teen, polite, curious, a little awkward, but full of heart. His family, Father Howard, Mother Marion, Sister Joni, and briefly seen older brother Chuck, gave the show its foundation of love and familiarity. Together, they represented what many families wanted to see in themselves: structure, warmth, and connection. Then there were Richie's friends, Patsy Weber and Ralph Malph, his partners in mischief and laughter. But among all the characters that danced through Arnold's diner, there was one who stole the spotlight. A character who wasn't even meant to stay, Arthur Fonzarelli. With his slicked back hair, leather jacket, and that famous E, Fonzie was everything teenage boys wanted to be and everything teenage girls adored. Originally introduced as a minor role, he became the show's unexpected heartbeat. And as audiences fell in love with him, the writers knew Fonzie wasn't just a sidekick. He was the show. Sound of motorcycle revving fades under voice. The era of Richie's innocence was giving way to something bolder, cooler, and undeniably iconic. When Happy Days began, Fonzie was little more than a background greaser, a supporting character meant to add a bit of edge to the wholesome world of the Cunninghams. But Henry Winkler's charm changed everything. With every smirk, every snap of the fingers, every moment he leaned on that jukebox and made it play, audiences couldn't look away. By the third season, the network realized what they had. Fonzie wasn't just a character, he was a phenomenon. He shared top billing with Richie. His face appeared on lunchboxes, posters, and comic books. He was the reason Happy Days became America's #1 show by the 1976-77 season. Music, triumphant 70s brass riff. Henry Winkler's Fonzie became more than a television figure. He was a symbol. Cool without cruelty, tough but kind. The guy who stood up for friends and respected the people around him. His transformation from a rebel biker to a role model captured hearts across generations. The show's creators knew they'd struck gold. But as they doubled down on Fonzie's fame, Happy Days slowly began to shift. What was once a series about family and community was becoming The Fonzie Show. The change brought bigger laughs, higher ratings, and more fanfare. But behind the success, subtle cracks were forming. Could a sitcom built on nostalgia survive when its focus drifted too far from its heart? That question would soon find its answer in one unforgettable episode. Before Happy Days became the hit we remember, it began as a small experiment. In 1972, a short segment called Love in the Television Set aired on Love, American Style. It introduced the Cunningham family. But back then, audiences barely noticed. It wasn't until George Lucas cast Ron Howard in American Graffiti that things changed. The movie's nostalgic 1950s tone reignited ABC's interest in Gary Marshall's idea, old film reel sound effect. 2 years later, Happy Days premiered. It arrived at the perfect moment. The early 70s were filled with turmoil, the Watergate scandal, Vietnam, shifting cultural norms. Americans were yearning for something lighter. Happy Days gave them that. A world where the past felt safe, simple and golden. And for a while it worked perfectly. For years, Happy Days stood as television's gold standard for family comedy. It wasn't just funny, it was wholesome. Parents could watch with their kids. Grandparents could smile at the memories. From Fonzie's lessons in loyalty to Richie's coming-of-age moments, it offered heart along with humor. But success can change a show's DNA. As Fonzie became the face of Happy Days, writers looked for bigger, bolder storylines to keep audiences hooked. And then came that episode, the one that would live in infamy. Music darkened slightly. One stunt, one shark, one pair of water skis, and a single leap that would echo through pop culture forever. It happened in Season 5. Episode 3, Hollywood Part 3. The episode's premise was simple. Fonzie, now in Hollywood, accepts a dare to jump over a live shark while wearing water skis. What could possibly go wrong? Sound splash, crowd cheers. For fans watching, it was both thrilling and bizarre. The once grounded sitcom had drifted into something absurd. The moment symbolized more than a stunt. It marked the shift from relatable stories to over-the-top antics. Critics noticed. Fans debated. And years later, radio host John Hine would coin the term jumping the shark to describe the exact moment any show begins to lose its essence. Though Happy Days continued for several more seasons, that jump defined it forever. For some, it was still fun, proof that Fonzie could do anything. For others, it was the end of an era. Soft fade to silence. The lesson was clear. When a show strays too far from what made it special, it risks losing its soul. Happy Days had soared higher than anyone expected. But that one, jump, became the metaphor for every creative misstep in television history. It's hard to imagine Happy Days without Henry Winkler's Fonzie, but that almost happened. Originally, Gary Marshall offered the role to Mickey Dolenz, drummer of the Monkees. Dolenz nailed the audition, but his 6-foot frame towered over the rest of the cast. Producers wanted someone shorter to balance the ensemble. Enter Henry Winkler, 5'6", New York-born, dyslexic, and determined. His first audition didn't go well. Reading scripts was a nightmare due to his dyslexia, so he improvised instead, bringing Fonzie to life with confidence and swagger. The producers were mesmerized. He didn't just play the part, he was the part. But there was one problem: motorcycles terrified him. Despite Fonzie's reputation as a bike-riding rebel, Winkler rarely rode one. The crew often placed the motorcycle on a rig or trailer, letting him act without actually driving. Motorcycle rev softly in background. What audiences saw as smooth, fearless cool was behind the scenes pure acting mastery, and Winkler didn't stop there. Years later, he co-authored a children's book series about a boy with dyslexia, inspired by his own story. From overcoming learning struggles to conquering fears, Winkler's journey mirrored Fonzie's growth, from misunderstood rebel to beloved mentor. His authenticity gave Happy Days its beating heart. Could anyone else have been the Fonz? Maybe. But it's hard to picture anyone but Henry Winkler giving us that iconic thumbs up and effortless charm. Mickey Dolenz might have brought energy, but Winkler brought humanity. His Fonzie wasn't just cool, he was kind. He taught us that real strength comes from compassion, not toughness. Music softens into nostalgic theme. It's one of those rare casting miracles that define a generation. The right actor, the right moment, the right story. And because of it, Happy Days didn't just make history, it made magic. Behind the laughter, though, not everyone was happy. Ron Howard, the show's original star, and had joined Happy Days fresh from film school. At first, everything seemed perfect, but as Fonzie fever swept the nation, Richie Cunningham began to fade from the spotlight. Howard later revealed that studio executives began treating him differently. When promoting the show, it was all about Fonzie. Richie, the boy next door, the show's original focus, became a background note. On the Graham Norton show, Howard recalled, "They started treating me with a lot of disrespect. It was just insane. Everything was about Fonzie. It wasn't jealousies, it was disappointment." Howard admired Winkler deeply, but the network's obsession with Fonzie made him feel invisible. Then came the final straw. Producers proposed renaming the show Fonzie's Happy Days. That's when Ron knew his journey with the show was over. Instead of bitterness, though, he chose reinvention. He left acting behind and pursued his passion for directing, a move that led him to films like Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and Cinderella Man. In hindsight, that tension gave Howard the push he needed to become one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers. Sometimes, the end of one chapter is simply the beginning of another. Despite its ups and downs, Happy Days remains one of television's most beloved creations. It gave us characters that felt like family, stories that made us laugh and cry, and a cultural legacy that still shines decades later. Sure, it jumped the shark, but it also jumped into history. The phrase "born from its stumble" became part of our vocabulary, a reminder of how even greatness can falter, but it also taught creators everywhere an essential truth. Authenticity never goes out of style. Ron Howard, Henry Winkler, and the entire Happy Days family gave us more than entertainment. They gave us a piece of America's heart. And as the final credits roll, we remember the laughter, the jukebox tunes, and the leather-jacketed man who made us believe that being cool was really about being kind. After Ron Howard's departure, Happy Days entered a new era, one marked by change, experimentation, and the challenge of keeping audiences engaged without the original heart of Richie Cunningham. While the show continued to enjoy strong ratings in its immediate aftermath, cracks were starting to show beneath the surface. With Fonzie now the undeniable star, the writers shifted focus even more toward his character, building storylines that highlighted his softer side, mentoring kids, exploring relationships, and even becoming a teacher. Though Henry Winkler's performance remained compelling, the once grounded world of Milwaukee began to drift into over-the-top territory. The show that once celebrated the nostalgia of the 1950s began to feel trapped by its own formula. New characters were introduced to fill the void left by Howard's departure. Joni Cunningham, Richie's younger sister played by Erin Moran, began taking center stage alongside her love interest Chachi Arcola, portrayed by Scott Baio. Their romance became one of the main emotional threads in the show's later seasons, and even inspired a spin-off titled Joni Loves Chachi. But the magic wasn't quite the same. Joni Loves Chachi premiered in 1982 with high expectations, banking on the popularity of its young stars. Unfortunately, the series failed to capture the same charm or humor as Happy Days and was canceled after just 2 seasons. Even so, it became a symbol of the show's lasting reach. Proof that even as Happy Days began to fade, its characters remained embedded in America's pop culture psyche. By the early 1980s, Happy Days faced a challenge common to long-running shows, maintaining freshness while staying true to its core. As the television landscape evolved, audiences began craving newer, edgier sitcoms like Cheers and Family Ties. Despite efforts to evolve, Happy Days found itself competing with a new generation of shows reflecting modern sensibilities. Yet even in decline, Happy Days never fully lost its charm. The camaraderie of the cast, the comforting sets, and the sense of family that had once made it a household favorite still resonated. When the series finally came to an end in 1984 after 11 seasons and 255 episodes, it left behind more than just memories, it left behind a legacy. As the final episode aired, viewers were reminded why the show had mattered so deeply. It wasn't about Fonzie's leather jacket or his motorcycle. It was about belonging. It was about the power of friendship, family, and finding your place in a world that often changes faster than you can keep up. The end of Happy Days marked the close of an era, but its spirit would live on, influencing countless sitcoms and inspiring generations of viewers who longed for the innocence of a bygone time. It's hard to overstate the cultural footprint Happy Days left behind. Few television shows can claim to have birthed not just memorable characters, but an entirely new phrase that entered the pop culture lexicon. Jumping the shark became the ultimate shorthand for the moment when a show overreaches and begins to decline. A direct reference to Fonzie's water skiing stunt in Season 5. But beyond that infamous scene, Happy Days redefined what a nostalgic sitcom could be. Its portrayal of 1950s America, with sock hops, diners, and wholesome family values, became a comforting escape for audiences navigating the social and political turbulence of the 1970s. In a world struggling with change, Happy Days offered the reassuring idea that some things like friendship, love, and laughter never go out of style. The show also launched the careers of several actors who would go on to become industry legends. Ron Howard, who began as a child actor on The Andy Griffith Show, transitioned into one of Hollywood's most respected directors, earning Oscars and critical acclaim. Henry Winkler, meanwhile, evolved beyond the Fonz, proving his depth as an actor, producer, and author. Even decades later, the show's influence can still be felt. It inspired spin-offs like Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, and Joni Loves Chachi, creating an extended Happy Days universe that dominated ABC's primetime lineup. The fact that Mork and Mindy introduced the world to Robin Williams, one of the most beloved comedians of all time, is a testament to the creative spark Happy Days ignited. But its cultural reach didn't stop there. Fonzie's leather jacket is now enshrined in the Smithsonian Institution, recognized as a symbol of 1970s pop culture. The phrase "aye" became part of everyday conversation, and reruns of Happy Days continue to attract nostalgic audiences who find comfort in its simplicity and warmth. Critics have since re-evaluated Happy Days with a greater sense of appreciation. While the jump the shark moment became a cautionary tale, it also underscored the show's willingness to experiment, to try something new even at the risk of ridicule. That boldness, ironically, has kept it relevant long after its final episode aired. Ultimately, Happy Days was never just about nostalgia, it was about connection. It reminded viewers that, no matter how much the world changes, we all long for moments that feel safe, familiar, and happy. While Happy Days shined brightly on screen, life behind the camera wasn't always as cheerful as the show's theme song. Like any long-running production, it had its share of tensions, friendships, and unforgettable moments that shaped its legacy just as much as the episodes themselves. For starters, the camaraderie among the cast was genuine. Henry Winkler often spoke fondly of the warmth that Gary Marshall, the show's creator, cultivated on set. Marshall ran Happy Days like a family rather than a business. Every actor was encouraged to contribute ideas, and that creative freedom gave the show its unique charm. Gary would walk in with a smile and remind us that our job was to make America laugh, Winkler once recalled. That's a pretty great reason to go to work every day. But the rise of Fonzie as the central figure did create an imbalance that some cast members found difficult. Ron Howard's earlier frustrations with the show's direction weren't unique. Actors like Don Most, Ralph Malph, and Anson Williams, Potsy, occasionally felt sidelined as the scripts focused increasingly on Fonzie's adventures. Still, to their credit, the cast maintained professionalism and deep respect for one another, even when the spotlight shifted. Behind the scenes, Gary Marshall had a simple philosophy. If something wasn't working, fix it fast. When storylines began to drift, he'd invite the actors into the discussion. "You can't fake chemistry," he'd say. And he was right. Despite creative ups and downs, the cast's chemistry carried the series for over a decade. As time passed, the Happy Days family remained close. They often reunited for special anniversaries and retrospectives, keeping the spirit of the show alive for fans who grew up watching them. In 1992, the cast came together for a 20th anniversary reunion special, a heartfelt trip down memory lane that reminded everyone why Happy Days mattered. Seeing Winkler and Howard laughing together again touched audiences deeply, showing that despite the ups and downs, true friendships had endured. Not every story had a happy ending, though. Erin Moran, who played Joni Cunningham, faced personal struggles after the series ended. Despite her early fame, she found it difficult to transition into adult roles, and eventually withdrew from Hollywood. When she passed away in 2017, her Happy Days co-stars paid emotional tributes. Henry Winkler's message summed it up best. "Rest in it peacefully, Joni. Always so sweet and full of light." Anson Williams, on the other hand, went on to become a successful director, while Marion Ross, who played the Cunningham matriarch, continued to act well into her later years, gracing both film and television. Tom Bosley, beloved as the steady, fatherly Howard Cunningham, passed away in 2010, leaving behind a legacy of kindness and professionalism that everyone on set admired. The reunions over the years served as reminders that Happy Days wasn't just a TV show. It was a bond that never really faded. When Henry Winkler and Ron Howard appeared together on talk shows decades later, their affection for one another was obvious. Winkler often credited Howard for his generosity during the show's peak years, saying, "Ron never let ego get in the way. He made space for everyone. That's what made Happy Days special." Even today, conventions and fan events celebrating the show still draw massive crowds. People come not just for nostalgia, but for the sense of joy the series still brings. The laughter, the lessons, the simple warmth of the Cunningham household. It all continues to resonate, proving that Happy Days weren't just on screen. For the cast and fans alike, they became a lasting part of life's story. 4 decades after it went off the air, Happy Days remains one of television's most beloved time capsules, a series that managed to capture the innocence of an earlier era while shaping the very foundation of modern sitcoms. Its influence stretches far beyond the 1970s and 1980s, the structure of family-centered comedies that balance humor with heart and seen in later hits like Full House, That 70s Show, and The Goldbergs, can be traced directly back to Happy Days. The show proved that audiences didn't just want jokes. They wanted connection. They wanted to see themselves in these families with all their imperfections, laughter, and love. The series also stands as a masterclass in how television evolves. Happy Days began as a nostalgic look at 1950s Americana, but by the time it ended, it had transformed into a reflection of the entertainment industry itself. A show learning to adapt, experiment, and occasionally stumble in the pursuit of staying relevant. The phrase "jumping the shark" may have originated as a critique, but it also symbolizes something more profound: the willingness to take creative risks, even when failure is possible. Henry Winkler has often spoken about how Happy Days changed his life, not just in terms of fame, but in helping him overcome his insecurities. For a dyslexic actor who once struggled to read his lines, becoming one of the most iconic figures in television history was proof of perseverance and belief. "The Fonz gave me confidence," Winkler once said. "He taught me that cool isn't about being perfect. It's about being yourself." Gary Marshall's legacy, too, continues to ripple through television. His knack for combining humor with humanity shaped countless writers and directors who came after him. The Happy Days formula, heart, humor, and hope, became the blueprint for family sitcoms for decades to come. In 2008, the cast reunited once more to celebrate the unveiling of the bronze Fonz statue in Milwaukee, a fitting tribute to the city and the show that made television history. Fans from all over the country gathered to honor the legacy of a series that had given them countless smiles. As Henry Winkler stood before the cheering crowd, he said simply, "It's been decades and still the love doesn't stop." Beyond pop culture, Happy Days holds a deeper meaning. It serves as a reminder of a simpler time, not perfect but hopeful. A time when families sat together around the TV sharing laughter after long days. In an age where television has grown darker, faster, and more fragmented, Happy Days endures as a symbol of optimism. The laughter may have faded, the sets long dismantled, But the spirit remains alive every time that familiar theme song plays. Those words capture something timeless, the idea that happiness isn't confined to an era. It's found in love, friendship, and community. It's found in stories that make us believe, even for a moment, that the world can be simple again. As the credits roll on this unforgettable journey, Happy Days stands not just as a show from the past, but as a celebration of storytelling itself. Its lessons about family, loyalty, growth, and resilience continue to echo across generations. So even though the jukebox has stopped spinning, the music of Happy Days plays on, in our memories, our hearts, and in every moment we look back and smile, knowing that in its own way, it gave us all a piece of happiness that never truly ended.